Hi everyone, this is Gary Wilson and welcome to this week's live Investor Agent webinar, and also welcome aboard to all the students who've been through the Flipping for Profits program, the wholesaling program, the program on buying rentals, which is rental problems without the pain, and also the program on managing rentals, which is turning rental problems into real estate profits. We've got several of you guys on here, I can see that. And also welcome aboard to all the new or newer folks. I've been in California for several weeks now, so most of the new folks are from California. And we have people literally on from coast to coast here in US and Canada, so welcome to everybody. Also welcome aboard to some of our veterans. So we got some veteran students on board here, been in it for a couple of years, so thank you very much for participating and sharing your wisdom and insight. All right, now if you're new to this, if this is your first webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping. You'll see that in your panel you have a question box. That's where you can type in questions. Okay, so I'm going to actually go there now and see if we got anything new that popped in. So throughout the webinar, this is where you type in your questions. Okay, from time to time I will unmute you and we can discuss things vocally, and everybody will be able to hear it. I don't think we've done that for quite a while. Also, maybe an average of once a month we'll have a guest on the webinar to talk about something specific. Last week was actually really cool. It's a guy named Sid Hadeen, and I know him from Washington, D.C. He buys notes from banks. So if you're interested in that subject and you were not on last week, just please look for that recording and you can download it and keep it. And Sid also gives you his contact information. He does quite well at obviously traditional investing too, and goes on because he's got I don't know that you've ever heard me ever curse before. I don't think I ever do, but Sid does a little bit. So kind of interesting. A little bit. It might have been a little bit of some mildly shocking moments where I realized it wasn't bad, but anyways, it's just interesting that this is unscripted, unfiltered, and you're going to get the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So in any case, this week what we're going to do is this. We're going to talk about, first off, money matters. All right, where can you get the money? We're going to talk about the basic stuff first. Then we're into a little bit slightly ventures. I don't like to get too creative. Usually for some newer folks, we like to have you build up to that, okay, with you and your clients. But that's the first part. Second part is we're going to talk about international investors, which is extremely hot topic right now. We've got a lot of them coming from all over the place. It's just, I mean, really, China, India, a lot of the Asian countries, several European countries, Africa, okay, South Africa, Kenya, of course, South America, of course, Canada, all right, in Russia, India, so in Australia. So in any case, the bottom line is you have to be prepared for that. And ironically, Roger asked us to discuss that, Roger Newble from Northern New Jersey, and that's what we're going to do tonight. We're also I'm going to let you know that we are creating a new module just for that. All of you get it for free, of course, because you're already students. The reason we're creating a new module for our foreign investors, international investors, is this. I've been invited to teach, and what we're going to do, this is the basic format we're going to follow. I'm not going there to teach them how to invest in their own country. I'm going there to teach them how to invest in the United States. That's the first part. The second part is they want to know who they can team up with to help them invest successfully. Well, that's going to be you. So it's very, very important that you update on the community site, okay, because you want these folks to be able to find you. They're going to get online based on we're going to have them go through kind of like a filtering process. So it's not, remember, it's a closed community. It's not open to everybody. The only agents on there, in fact, are you guys, the investor agents, okay? Any of you who are students, you get a profile on there for free. All right, the investors have to go through an educational process so that we know that they're qualified and know how to work with you, okay? So this is a really timely subject, and many of you are getting approached by international investors. It happens daily now. I mean, I'm getting calls and emails almost daily. So that's the basic subject for tonight's webinar. Now let me just check real quick. Okay, let's see. Everybody seems to be, there's no more content questions. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and jump in. First things first, let's go to the money matter. So let me bring up this. Hang on one second. Let's go over here and start with this. All right. This is from Rental Profits Without the Pain. If you've taken this training course, you're familiar with this. If you haven't, you can certainly take it. And by the way, you get it. All of you, I didn't know if you're aware of this or remember, but if you're an existing or current student, any other training you get for half price, guys. So you can literally take a 10 or 12 course program. I mean, for half price, it's just amazing. So in any case, just keep that in mind. Okay, first things first. Let's go over the basic, simple stuff first. When it comes to money, what are the sources? Well, obviously, savings is a source, and we don't want to spend a lot of time on that because everybody understands what savings is. CDs, it's hard to believe that banks actually still offer CDs, but believe it or not, they do. I can remember, and this is going to tell you how old I am, I can remember when we had CDs that were paying 15%, okay? Back in the late 70s, early 80s, banks were offering CDs that were paying much because interest rates were 18, 19, 20, 21% that consumers were paying for loans, okay? So CDs is a great way to get some money to invest in real estate, because otherwise it's making like 0.01%. And quite frankly, you're probably losing money in CDs because it's not even keeping pace with inflation, and you got to pay taxes on it, all kinds of stuff, you know. Mutual funds, of course, are where you can invest in a mutual fund that itself goes out and buys a number of different underlying stocks. So what you do is you're able to spread your eggs across multiple baskets and reduce your risk. But nonetheless, there are all kinds of different mutual funds. There's stock funds, bond funds, treasury bill funds, and within those categories, there's other multiple subcategories, okay? There's even hybrid funds that combine a number of different strategies within the one fund. So just to bear in mind that the stock market has been on the increase for a while here, and you know, one of the reasons this is important information is probably within the next year you're going to see more people pulling money out of the stock market. That's just what we believe. Don't quote me on that. It's just an opinion based on what I hear from people that I trust. Okay. So in any case, it's a source of funding for people. All right, stocks. That's when you buy individual stocks in individual companies. You know, if you have a company that has really grown in value over time and you think it's starting to level off or teeter off, it might be a good time to sell. Okay, you don't want to sell when everything's down, because that's how you lose money. All right, you want to sell when you believe things are sort of leveling off there. But another source of income, just like bonds, bonds haven't paid much at all for a long time. In fact, if you've got an old bond that's paying, you know, 6, 7, 8% or more, I'd say hang on to it. Okay. By the way bonds work is it's like an inverse relationship. So let's say you have a bond that's paying 5% and it's 5 years old, and today interest rates on that type of a, you know, the instruments that those bonds invest in go up, well, that bond becomes less valuable. However, if interest rates go down, that bond becomes more valuable. All right, it's an inverse relationship. Okay, real estate. Obviously, this is what we're all in this business for, is to invest in real estate and or help others who are investing in real estate. Real estate, your actual equity in the properties themselves can be a source of funds. We'll talk more about that later, but just keep in mind that there are a number of ways to borrow against your existing properties. I know a lot of people think, well, my bank won't do that. Well, you should probably look at other banks. There are banks who will do that. And just a little bit of a heads up here, guys. I would always keep an average of 5 banks at my disposal who I was using to get financing. You know, and the reason is I wasn't necessarily pricing them against each other. But the reality is there's a number of things. Number one is banks have what's called a loans to one ratio. What that means is they're only allowed to loan only but so much money to any one investor, any one client. And when you reach that loans to one ratio, they can no longer lend money to you. And I've had that happen. I've borrowed so much from a particular bank. This happened a number of times where they would say, we can't lend any more money to you. We like you, but we're going to be in violation of rules and regulations. So in any case, there's a number of factors there. Another big factor is this. Banks always have to keep a balance on their books. I don't mean a balance like a bank balance, but a balanced portfolio of the different types of loans that they are making. So if a bank is too heavily leveraged on duplexes, for example, they got a lot of loans outstanding on duplexes, they may pull back on financing other duplex purchases. So you need to understand these things so that you can direct your clients to different banks, but depending on what type of appetite any particular bank has. So in other words, if you see a bank advertising, open up a checking account and get a free toaster, they probably need to raise capital. They don't really have an appetite for making loans right now. They'll make some, but not aggressively. However, if you have a bank advertising, come up a home equity loan and we'll give you, we'll waive the application fee. Well, that bank definitely has money to lend and you want to go to that bank. But within that broad category, remember they do have different buckets. And if they feel too heavily weighted in any particular bucket, like duplexes again for this example, they will likely pull back on financing of other duplexes. If they're kind of light on storage facilities, yeah, they might be more aggressive on financing storage facilities. But you get the gist here, okay? So in any case, I wanted to bring all that up because that's kind of like the basic obvious stuff. And what I would tell you is this, is I'm a big fan of cash. You know, it took me a while to get there, but the reality is you can get there. And when you do get there, life is a lot more pleasant, let me tell you, okay? So the trick is, how do you get there? Which leads us to the second thing I'm going to show you. All right, so let's go look at the next set of data, which is going to be this, okay? Now this information comes from the training program, Flipping for Profits Without the Risk, okay? Now, a lot of you are working with flippers out there because it tends to be the really hot topic these days. Everybody, it's glamorous. Everybody loves the concept of, you know, selling a flip and cashing in, you know, $50,000 or $80,000 or $100,000. Sounds glamorous, and it is. It's a lot of fun. The challenges of flipping is, I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but just keep in mind that flipping is trading time for money. So when you stop flipping, you no longer have chunks of money coming in, all right? However, the rentals, back to the book that I just came from with rentals, the good news is you buy and hold. You accumulate a portfolio and build a portfolio over time, okay? And the good news there is you can take time off. You can go to take a vacation in the summertime, take a vacation in the wintertime, and when you come back, chances are your properties increased a little bit in value and probably is bringing in more rent. That's why I'm a huge fan of buy and hold, which is building a portfolio of bigger and bigger properties, okay? So we're talking more about that here in a minute, but there's a lot of, you know, if you have this training program, you're going to see in there this information. But let's just go ahead and kind of skim through this. What I'm talking about on this page is the different areas around the U.S. and Canada, and where it might be a really good area. We're going to touch on that. I'm going to show you some of those areas here in a little bit. Okay, but first things first, let's do this. You know, if you look at the markets in the, you know, for right now, let's just say we're talking about U.S. and Canada. Okay, it's a little bit different. See, in Canada, guys, we don't actually sell our mortgages, right? We keep them in-house. So in the U.S., when we went through the major recession back beginning in 2007, it's quite frankly, we still got inventory from that recession. The reason we sunk so far and had such a hard time in the U.S. is we sell our mortgages. We sell them on the secondary market, and in that marketplace, groups of mortgages are grouped together and sold as packages. Right? They're sold as people invest in them. Well, because of all kinds of crazy stuff that was going on in the early 2000s, a lot of those loans were not good loans, and so those loan portfolios were not worth what people thought they were, and loans started defaulting. All right, and those loans became, the loan packages became less and less valuable, and the banks that were making the loans sometimes went out of business. Okay, it was pretty dramatic. I'm sure you remember. Well, in Canada, we don't do that. We didn't have any problem because we don't sell our mortgages in Canada, right? So in any case, moving forward, I just want to paint that broad picture because you would use different strategies in different marketplaces. Same fundamentals, just a different strategy. All right, and so let's go ahead and move on. Let's say we have an investor. Let's use Roger's suggestion. Let's talk about people who are investing and they want to keep investing. And how do we help them keep investing? Well, in the U.S., one of the things that people have available to them, typically if they're an employee in a corporation, are retirement funds in the form of let's just use the 401k right now for an example. Most big corporations use a 401k, all right, and offer a 401k to their employees. And they will match you if you contribute to that 401k. They'll typically match you, sometimes up to dollar for dollar matching, which is pretty awesome, okay? So you could contribute 6% of your pay, and they'll match you 6% of your pay from the company funds, which means you're essentially putting aside 12% for retirement, okay? Now, the reason this is important is this. You can borrow against those funds, and most companies will let you borrow, in fact, up to 50% of the value of those 401ks. The reason this is important is this. When you borrow money against your own 401k, you're not involving anybody else. You're not involving a bank. You're not involving a property that you own. You're not leveraging anything. You're simply pulling it temporarily out of your 401k. Okay? Now, the good news is this. When you pay it back, and you will pay it back, any interest that's charged, and they do put an interest rate on that, you actually are paying yourself back. So let's say you believe the market is in a shift and it's going to be headed downward. We believe it is. You know, if you see the market start to teeter at the top, it climbs and climbs and climbs, and it kind of teeters back and forth. That's probably a good time to start converting those funds into something else. So maybe you borrow whatever you want to borrow up. You can borrow up to half and use that money to invest in real estate. Perfectly legitimate, perfectly legal. There's usually an application fee that you fill out with your employer, and sometimes a small processing fee or application fee. But you get access to the funds. You can use that to buy real estate, and as your real estate produces results, you pay back your 401k. Okay. So in any case, 401k is a great way to get funding for buying real estate. I know some of this may seem like it's risky to you guys, but I will tell you this. It is far less risky to borrow against yourself than to borrow involving other people, okay? So just keep that in mind. It's just, you know, first time I did it, it was maybe a little bit scary, but I got used to it and did it an awful lot. And a lot of people do. A lot of savvy investors borrow regularly from the 401ks. They borrow and pay it back, and borrow and pay it back, and borrow and pay it back. Okay, now within the broad guideline of using your retirement funds, a lot of people have individual IRAs, okay? And you can borrow from your own individual IRAs, buy from within the individual IRA. So this is an entire subject in and of itself. I just want to give you some broad brushstrokes here, okay? Excuse me. First thing is this. You typically have to have a separate IRA that's set up as a self-directed IRA, okay, in a banking institution that offers the product. Self-directed IRA that allows you to buy real estate properties from within the IRA. Okay, that's the first thing. So generally what people do is sometimes they'll do a transfer from other retirement sources like a 401k directly into an IRA. They'll fund the IRA first. Okay, and then you use the funds in the IRA to purchase a property, and the IRA actually will own the property. The IRA is actually a legal instrument, a legal entity, if you will. So the IRA actually owns the property. And the good news is you can actually still borrow, funds to purchase the property. Now, the lending is a little bit more strict. When you buy from within an IRA, any lender will generally only want to lend you 50% loan to value, typically 50%. So in other words, you got to come up with the other 50% from your IRA, you know, to purchase the property, and the bank will give you 50% of a loan, form of a loan, for the remainder, right? Now the reason why they're very conservative is this. So your IRA technically is protected. It has certain protections under the IRS code, and one of those protections is, let's say you defaulted on a mortgage, okay? That lender could not come to get the other assets or funds from within your IRA. They're prevented from doing that. They're legally not allowed to do that. Okay, so there's more risk on their part. Now, let's say you get hit by the bus, everything falls apart. That bank's risk essentially up to 50%. So that's why they want to be conservative and only lend 50% loan to value, okay, from within an IRA. The other thing about IRAs, guys, is you can't actually, you got to be careful what type of work you do relative to your investments. Typically, you have to have a arm's length distance between you and your properties. You can't be directly involved or actively involved with taking care of those properties, right? Now, what you can do is you can, of course, set up a separate company, like a maintenance repair company that does all of your maintenance repairs on your properties, okay? And they will allow you to take as much as 10% as like a management fee or something like that, okay? So just be aware there's some restrictions and rules within the world of IRAs and buying within IRAs. So in any case, enough on that. Again, that's a whole subject in and of itself. There's an entire industry built around this whole process here. And we could actually write an entire program just on that. In fact, people have. Okay, so let's do this. Let's move down here and move into the next possible category, which is a whole life policy. All right, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of affluent people, wealthy people, have whole life insurance policies. Okay, I know a lot of us have studied finance and insurance and things like that, and we've been told that whole life policies are not really a good deal. Well, that's true for most middle class America. Okay, you generally would get like a term life policy, far less expensive, and by the time you're in retirement years, you really shouldn't need a whole lot. However, people who are really affluent, very wealthy, affluent people, use it as a hedge against risk. They use it for a number of reasons, actually. But if they have heirs and a sizable estate, they have a huge whole life policy that provides some protection in the case of their demise. But the good news is this: it does have an investment component, and you can also withdraw funds from a whole life policy. So it in fact becomes another source of funding to purchase investment real estate. In other words, you can withdraw funds from your whole life policy against the cash value to purchase real estate. Many people do it, okay? Particularly those who are affluent, so keep that in mind, all right? Okay, next possible category are private partnerships, all right? Oops, sorry, I went a little bit too far. Hang on one second, guys. Let me bring this back up here. Well, this thing is doing all kinds of weird stuff, sorry. I don't know why that's doing that, sorry. In any case, private partnerships, all right? Private partnerships are used, here we go. When people want to raise funding, so let's just use our imagination here. Let's say you have an investor who has time but is limited on capital, okay? And you have another investor who has ample capital but is limited on time. The perfect marriage or relationship is to bring those two people together. Bring together the investor who has time with the investor who has money, and they can form a private partnership, all right? Generally what you would do is set up an LLC, okay? And the person with the money would be like a silent or passive partner, and you would be the active partner, sometimes called the general partner, depending on how you're structured. Now, I'm not going to get into too much on the legalities of LLCs and partnerships. That's a whole other class. We'll do that another time. All right, for right now, just know that you wouldn't generally do a private partnership and have it set up as a sole proprietorship or where you both are directly involved with the investing. That would be too risky. So you set up a LLC. The person with the money puts money in the LLC. They actually fund the LLC. Then the LLC goes out and buys a property. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up here. You have to be careful soliciting funds from others. If you're going to be out there doing that, and you're going to be advertising and marketing and promoting certain properties and things like that, you need to talk to an attorney, all right? Because that's technically falls in the world of potentially within the world of syndication. And if you're soliciting funds from affluent investors and you need, you're raising a lot of money, like in the six figures, okay? Generally speaking, those people need to be accredited investors, right? You need to validate that they're accredited, which means they have, at least a net worth of at least $1 million and an annual income of about 250,000. Now the rules have been changing on that, and that's why I tell you really need to speak to an attorney who specializes in private offering memorandums, which was what you would do in that case. Okay, but in most cases, if it's just you and a neighbor, or you and an uncle, or you and a parent, or a brother or sister, and you just happen to agree upon this at a picnic or something, fine. All right. I would still suggest you get an attorney involved to draw up the LLC document, because you want to protect your relationship with your loved one. Okay. Again, I'll save those discussions for another class. But in any case, the bottom line is this: is you can form private partnerships to raise capital from investors who really don't have the time to get directly involved with the actual activity of investing. Okay, so there's private partnerships. I mean, there's a number of things you can. I mean, just to give you an idea of how advanced this can be, we created a closed-end mutual fund one time. We did help somebody create a REIT one time. We've certainly done a number of private offering memorandums, i.e., syndications. Okay, so there's a lot of advanced techniques you can get involved in. Right now, I just want you to focus on the basics. Okay. And again, so there's one more strategy I want to go over, and I hate to go over because I loathe the concept of hard money lenders. I'm not saying they're bad people. They serve a niche. The challenge is hard money is called hard money for a reason. Okay, the terms can be quite difficult. In fact, I'll just give it paint a broad brushstroke here. Let's say you or a client decide to use a hard money lender because you're tapped out of cash. You really can't get a loan because you're too highly leveraged as it is, but you find a really good deal, say for a flip, and you go to a hard money lender and say, look, I've got this great deal. I know it will make a lot of money. Would you fund the purchase and even possibly the remodeling of that property? And if a hard money lender looks at that project and says, hey, that's a viable project. I like the area. I like the house. I like the remodeling project you're proposing. And yeah, I'll loan you money. And they will charge you a lot of points up front. In other words, instead of just paying 0 or 1 or 2 points, they might charge you sometimes up to 10 points. Okay. It depends on where you are right now. You could be paying on average 6 to 8 points. That means for every you got to pay a portion of funds out in the form of like a fee for every dollar you borrow. All right. Again, sometimes it's 6 or 8%. Sometimes it's 10%. That's sunk cost. You don't get that back. Okay. Now the other thing too is the interest rates are generally higher. I mean, you might be able to get 8 or 10% now, but I know people who are paying 12% or more. I mean, I remember when people were paying 15% for hard money loans. Okay, what's the interest rate you pay on the outstanding principal? So here's the challenge. Let's say you get the property with the price you wanted it. You go into the remodeling and you realize, you open up a wall to fix a pipe, and then you got to redo the wiring. I mean, you've seen this stuff happen. It just goes on and on and on. Project gets delayed. Project goes over budget, and it ends up costing a lot more than you originally thought. In the meantime, you've got a term with this hard money lender that said, hey, you got 3 months to remodel and 3 months to sell. We're going to give you 6 months to pull this off. Well, if you exceed that 6 months, almost always they'll give you one get out of jail free card. They'll let you slide, but they'll do an extension, which by the way, they charge you for perhaps another 3 months. Okay, it varies. It could be 6 months, could be 1 month. It just varies. But you're going to pay for that extension. But let's say now you still don't get the thing done, and you still own it. Well, that hard money lender has the legal right to step in and take over the property, take over the project and everything. And they're hard. The terms are hard. That's what I mean. It's not like you could be Gandhi or Mother Teresa, and quite frankly, they're not going to care. The bottom line is you had a contract with them and you didn't deliver, and they're gonna pay themselves back by taking the property over. So just bear in mind there are some really tough terms to doing a hard money loan. All right. So in any case, I just want to mention that I know it's a viable option for a lot of people. I don't like it. I don't recommend it. I would rather see your investors get their licenses and use their license to serve other people, raise excess cash flow in the way of commissions to build up some capital. to go and do their own investing. So in any case, there's all kinds of verbiage in here and flipping for profits, talking about how many loans if you decide you want to do that. So let's real quick check for some questions. So hang on one second. Okay, we have Michael. Hey, Michael. So Michael is asking, all right, what if I have a 401k from a previous employer but no longer with the company? Can I still, am I still able to borrow 50% of my 401k? Well, Michael, unfortunately, unless there's some weird, rare exception, the answer has always been no. Once you leave a company, even if you leave your 401k there, they will not allow you to borrow any money against that 401k. The only thing you can do is do like a rollover into a self-directed IRA or some other type of rollover into another qualified retirement fund. And maybe from that new fund, you can perhaps borrow. But most employers, at least I've never seen one allow you to borrow against the 401k once you've left the company. So I'd say the answer is pretty much no on that one. But excellent question too. I appreciate you raising that question up. Okay, let me do this. Let me go back to Roger's email. So let's see, we talked about the borrowing, that's number one. Now let's talk about international investors. Okay, so first things first is this. I want to bring back up the community site on our website for all of you, the investor agents. And by the way, if you have gone through one of the other programs, you should be able to get on this website as well. Okay, but if you, as you can see here, excuse me, many people have entered their profiles, and many people have entered their vendors have put their profiles out there. So here's the beautiful thing about this website, guys. If you build your profile out here, and we should see a lot more California profiles, by the way, for you Californians, and some more Texas profiles. Actually, we should see some more New York profiles too, by the way. But in any case, the beautiful thing about this is, let's say you have an investor, and we'll just use the example of an international investor since that's what we're going to talk about here next. And they're working with you in Denver, Colorado, okay? And they tell you, by the way, Christy Baker set this up. So hi, Christy, hope you're online. Let's say Christy's investor is from China, and they also want to invest in Los Angeles. And they ask Christy, say, Christy, do you have anybody else out there who's like you, who's trained like you to be able to work with me? What Christy can say is, absolutely. I'm going to refer you to one of these folks out here. And Christy will look them up, read their profiles, and refer that transaction over, which means this agent gets a commission, gets a transaction out of the deal, okay? And this agent, Christy, gets a referral fee, all right? And you don't have to involve, you don't have to pay us a dime for this. This is part of your, one of the benefits of you guys being a member, okay? That's one component. The other component is this. As we attract international investors, and we are really doing it in a big way, these folks are going to be coming on here, and they're going to be locating you directly. So let's say, let's see, who is this right here? Name's not popping up. Oh, there it is. Troy Stewart. Okay, Troy. So let's say international investor, or any investor, finds you directly. That could be in the U.S., that could be in Canada. What that means is any commission you earn from that, you get to keep the whole commission, you and your broker. You don't have to pay a referral fee on that, okay? You get access to this site. That's the simple virtue of the fact that you're a student, okay? So what that means, guys, is you should be putting your profiles out here. By the way, we should have some for Phoenix and Albuquerque too. I'll have to call those guys. Put your profiles out here so these investors can find you, whether they're international or domestic. Regardless, build your profile. Let these guys find you. You get those commissions directly and don't have to pay a referral fee on them. Okay. The other thing is too is you also get to put your properties out here. You get to advertise your properties on this website, and we want you to keep it to investor properties, obviously, right? And when you do that, all these other investor agents get notified, and they can come look at your property. And believe me, investors just like me don't just invest in one location. I used to, years ago when I first got started, I would just concentrate on where I was. But once I learned that other markets are just as viable or more viable, I realize, holy smokes, I'm going to go invest in those other markets. By the way, international investors are investing heavily in California, mostly Los Angeles and San Francisco, certainly New York, Atlanta, Dallas. All the major metropolitan areas are attracting international investors, guys, because they like to invest in or near the big cities. They don't want to invest in, what would, I don't know, maybe like way up here in Montana. You can see there's not much up here, okay? But if you're in one of these other areas, Denver, Kansas City, my gosh, Minneapolis, Detroit, oh my goodness, you should have a profile out there because you're going to attract these international investors, and you can put your properties out there too. In any case, we also are putting vendors out there on a restricted basis. We'll put lenders who will lend nationally. Locally, we would put out there inspectors, for example, attorneys. Some attorneys can practice in multiple states, but generally they're just practicing in their own home state. There's a credit guy we interviewed last month, and in any case, he's out here. He can help your clients no matter where they are. So in any case, you definitely want to take advantage of this. If you log into myinvestmentservices.com, that's the first thing, and then you go to the members area and log into the silver level membership area, log into that first. The next panel you'll see is going to have a picture just like this with a link, a hot button to log into this website. And by the way, there's a video just below it that you can watch to show you how to build a profile on this site. Okay, very, very important. So keep that in mind. You guys should all be doing that. But let's go into some information here. I want to do this. Hang on one second. Let me go back to my Word docs. Okay, so let's talk about foreign investors a little bit. First, let me check the question box and make sure we're okay. And yes, it looks like we're okay. Okay, first things first, and I'm going to do this in a summary fashion. This is not intended to be an in-depth instructional class on foreign investors. It's meant to be an overview, okay, to show you what's possible and what you need to look into and what your clients need to look into. So let's just go through them in order. First things first is a lot of people wonder, okay, well, if somebody buys property in the United States, can they become a citizen? Not necessarily. It does not give you the rights and privileges regarding your legal stay or status, right? Typically, people coming here, if they don't have if they're not a citizen, they have like a visa. There's different types of visas and green cards and things like that. However, I will tell you, owning property, if you're an international, owned property in the States, does actually help you, okay, in that regard. So in any case, you have to determine what the primary use of the property is. Now, let's just assume the internationals that we're dealing with are buying to invest. They're buying to invest, not to actually live in a home. So let's just assume that, because that's what we're all here for. All right. So first things first. This is the difficult part. Every state has its own set of rules. Okay. Every state has its own set of rules regarding international investors investing in those particular states. All right. So the challenge is this. You have to you have to understand your client's needs and wants and where they want to be. So if they're investing with you in your state, let's just say, Roger, they're investing with you in New Jersey, keep in mind that anything that you've helped them with in New Jersey, the same legalities, also when it comes to taxes, by the way, may or may not apply in another state. So you need to make sure they're aware that wherever they operate, they need to let you refer them to the appropriate investor agent. And that investor agent will know to seek out an attorney, preferably a title company, who has experience working with international investors, and they can give them the basic forms. It's not that complex. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute. Okay. In any case, in the United States, to serve a client, regardless of where they come from, the realtor serving them has to be a licensed agent. There's no exceptions. Okay. Here it says right here, United States real estate agents need licenses to operate. It sounds pretty obvious, but believe it or not, there are countries where they don't have to have a license. Okay, there's some of them here, Costa Rica, Belize. I'm actually going to be teaching in those two countries. The rules are changing globally, though. Just bear in mind the rules are changing almost everywhere. So in any case, the interesting thing about working with international investors, guys, is you have to do more work. You have to do more work. So as such, international investors who are successful recognize that and are willing to pay for that. Like I would charge a per diem, I would also charge a retainer, which basically compensates me for the extra work I'm going to be doing for the international investor, and it's worth it for them to do that. Okay, one of the things you need to also bear in mind is that they're going to be interested in what the conversion rates are, the exchange rates, for their currency versus the U.S. dollar. The good news is there's multiple exchange rate calculators online that you can get for free. I don't want to go into it now, but just you could Google currency conversion or currency exchange rates, and you'll get the tables of the exchange rates and also the calculators, right? Okay, so the foreign investors. Number one is we want them to work with you guys, all of us, investor agent specialists, investor agents, because like a certified international property specialist doesn't mean that they're necessarily qualified to work with investors. They may be perfectly qualified to work with internationals who are buying homes to live in, but not necessarily investors. We had that discussion today in class, in fact, okay? But the reason I want to work with you is this. I'll give you the example. Let's just use an analogy. Let's say you were looking to invest in stocks and bonds and mutual funds, and you go to a financial planner, and they say, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I'm willing to work with you because I've never had any formal training, but I'm going to be figuring this stuff out as I go along. How would you like to work with that person? Well, that's how the international investors feel. They don't want to just work with just any old agent. They want to work with us, investor agents who are trained and qualified and certified to work with them, okay? So in any case, you don't have to speak their language. I mean, there's interpreters out there. There's also websites you can go to and online tools where you can translate contracts from one language to another, okay? So they're used to that, by the way. We might not be used to it, but the internationals are. Just bear in mind that that's available to you, all right? Okay, financing. A couple things here. Typically banks will want international investors to put down larger down payments. They will also want them to have those funds on deposit in the United States. Okay, and by the way, there are multiple lenders out there, not just here in the United States, but also globally, who will finance international investors investing in the United States. In fact, there's a couple of them here. There's a bank called East West Bank. Okay, there's a bank called Bangkok Bank. Okay, of course they're obviously in Bangkok, and they will finance international investors, typically from the Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, things like that. But some of them will fund investors from other areas too. So they'll provide the funding for purchases in the U.S. But let's just talk about domestic banks. Domestic banks typically will want more money down, and also they want that money on hand, on deposit, in a secured account well before the actual transaction takes place. So just keep that in mind, okay? And remember, this is where currency rates and exchange rates can come into play, because they might put in, say $500,000 today in a U.S. bank, and because of the currency exchange rates and the way that they vary, within a few months, that money could be less valuable to them because the value of the dollar, it could go up, could go down, you just don't know. All right. A lot of people ask, do they need to become a U.S. citizen to buy property? The answer is no, you don't need your citizenship or a green card, but you will need a tax identification number, okay? You can get that online, by the way. The process is free. You can go to irs.gov, and it will show you how to get a tax ID. So just bear that in mind. By the way, I'm going to provide all this to you guys too. I'll make sure I get it to Beverly so she can send this to you tomorrow. Okay. Now they're going to want to know what to expect when they meet with you. Here's what I would do to prepare yourself: is make sure you have a handle on the area that these folks want to invest in, which you should. You can provide them a printout of your school report to show them that you know exactly what neighborhoods to invest in. Okay. A lot of people are also wondering, should they hire a real estate attorney? Absolutely. There's no law that says you have to, but boy, I tell you what, if I'm investing in Poland or South Africa, you better believe I'm going to make sure I'm working with a qualified attorney in that area. And you should partner yourself up. You should partner with a title company who either is owned by a lawyer or has a lawyer on retainer typically, and partner with them so that you can do referrals back and forth, okay? And basically help each other serve your clients. Let's see here. Foreign investors typically are buying single-family homes, condos, small apartment complexes. They are also investing in larger properties, right? Some ownership groups will prevent foreign ownership. It's in their bylaws. You just have to be aware of that. So if you have a foreign investor looking to purchase a condo in a condo community, definitely get that condo community's bylaws and read them first, and make sure you know that they will just validate that they do or don't have restrictions for foreign investors. Okay, just like domestic investors, I recommend that foreign investors buy within a company. Okay, you can certainly buy in your own name, but I recommend no matter what you buy investor properties in some type of a holding company. Okay, it's just my recommendation there. All right, can you pay cash? Yep, you better believe it. Although there are some, well, one thing you gotta be aware is this: anytime there's a transaction in the U.S., it doesn't matter what it is, that involves $10,000 or more, it's called large cash reporting, LCR. That's one of the businesses I used to manage when I was in banking. LCR, large cash reporting, has to be reported. Okay. Now, of course, in real estate, most transactions are much larger than 10,000. So there's more. There's hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and more often than not, the funding of the deposit, for example, the down payment is greater than 10,000. In any case, you can pay all cash. There's no reason why a foreign investor can't pay all cash. They absolutely can. It will save them money by doing that. Obviously, they don't have to go through financing and all those fees and headaches. So there are certain areas where foreign investors should look. I'm not going to single any place in or single any place out. I will just tell you statistically, Florida leads the pack with 23%. California is next with 17%. Arizona and Texas next with 9%. New York at 3%. But we have a lot of international investors in Alabama, in Georgia. They're everywhere. Minnesota, Michigan, of course. But what you want to do is you want to understand your particular market where you are, and you can, on a regular basis, get up to date on where the best areas are right now for buying real estate. There's all kinds of reports, 10 best areas to invest, for example. Last year, Utah was in that, right, as well as the Carolinas were in that. So, but it really does, you can always find investments every place, every area. It doesn't matter. I mean, people always say things like, well, how can you invest in California when it's so expensive? Well, guess what? That's the second leading place where international investors invest, because they like the appreciation. They like the fact that there's multiple large cities, San Diego, San Francisco, LA. They like that stuff, okay? All right, next question is, do I have to travel to the U.S. for a closing? The answer is absolutely not. It's not necessary. You can, but it's not necessary. You just have a power of attorney. And believe it or not, you as an agent can actually be power of attorney. I don't know if that I recommend it, but you can be a power of attorney. Okay, there are additional fees, or there typically are. You might pay another, 1 to 2%, for example. It actually says they're 1 to 2.25% for additional fees. How will investing in U.S. real estate affect my taxes? Well, every home country, wherever they come from, could have its own sets of rules. Okay, but just know that the U.S. government is going to require internationals to pay income tax on any net income, okay, that they get from property in the United States. Now, some other countries have reciprocal. So let's say the foreign country does tax their citizens on money that they make in other countries. They will allow you to net out what you've already paid to the U.S., and you would only pay the difference to their home country. Some foreign countries don't do that, though. You just have to pay what you would pay in the U.S. and they would not pay any income tax on those investments in their own home country. Kind of neat, huh? Now, I know some of you are probably thinking right now, were there any workarounds? Or, yeah, and the answer is it depends. And I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do. Just know that there are people who have found loopholes and are getting very creative in how they're investing. I like to keep things simple myself, and that way it's easier to understand, and also I have less to worry about. I don't have to keep track of so much stuff. Simpler is better, believe me. Okay, FIRPTA. What is FIRPTA? Foreign Investment in Real Estate Tax Act in 1980. All right. This is the ruling authorizing the U.S. government to withhold tax when property is sold, exchanged, or gifted, transferred, or liquidated. Internal Revenue Service takes 10% of the proceeds, and the state government will also take a percentage. So your investors need to know that, right? Just make sure your investors know that when you ever do sell a property, Uncle Sam's going to take 10%, and the state may take even more. Okay, guys, I just gave you a whole mouthful of information there. So let me do this. Let me check and see if we have any questions. And I'm going to go back and check Roger's email too. So hang on one second here. Okay, let's see. Any steps in legal documentation required, communication for foreign investors? Yeah, so Roger, I would check right away. If you've got investors contacting you now, wherever you are, whatever state you're in, whatever real estate office you're in, go to that the title company or escrow company that your office is working with, and let them know that you've been contacted by an international investor, and what can they tell you, what can they give you to give to the investor. Now, within a matter of a few short months here, I'm going to have that information for you to give to your investors, okay? But for right now, you've got to go contact your whatever closing company your office is using, or in some states we call it an escrow company, all right? And they can point you in the right direction and give don't want to make contact with the investor also. All right. So the last thing is there anybody else? Yes. Okay. The challenge is this: you can get your involved with you to a certain degree, but the one thing that they're typically not going to be able to do because they're not here is actually go and put eyes on the property. So you can do all the legwork up front. All right. You can do all the initial analysis online. Use the 12-step process we give you with you and your investor. But when it comes to doing drive-bys and the physical analysis of the property, you've got to do that. And you can have it farmed out to another person, or the investor themselves can pay somebody else to do that job. I don't know that I recommend that because it adds one more cog into the works, and you may or may not know that person. That person may or may not have any experience with investor properties. It's up to you. I've seen people go either way on that. I would have them sign a document that says that they're responsible for their ultimate decision. All I'm doing is providing an opinion. That's all I'm doing. Okay. I'm not suggesting, I'm not recommending that they buy the property. I'm just saying I went through the property. And by the way, sometimes you can team yourself up with an inspector who will go through and do a quickie for you for like $100. And you would obviously pass it on to your investor. But that way you've got another person doing it, but you're with them and you're going them through the property with them, which you should do anyways. And it kind of lends a little credibility to the findings. So Roger, I would keep that in mind. Okay, let's here and check for questions. Let's see here. Michael. I think there's another question from Miho. Okay, Miho. All right. If that's the case, I would ask him and get sorry, my wall was going here. Get clarification on how he sees that relationship working, what he expects from you, and you want to get the somebody's saying, okay, it sounds like the audio is back. It was weird as I could hear myself talking to my headset, which normally doesn't happen, but it sounds like it's back. Yeah, it sounds like I went to a time warp. So in any case, Miho, I hope that answered your question. You know, in the case of a foreign investor, international investor having a license, I would absolutely clarify the relationship and what the expectations are and put it in writing. That's what I recommend there. So in any case, guys, it looks like we're wrapping up here. I don't see any other questions. Roger, I appreciate the subject matter for tonight. I hope that helped you. We will see you all next week. And let's see, what is next week's date for the webinar? Looks like it's going to be next Tuesday. So if you have, again, if just like Roger, guys, if you have suggestions for subjects to cover, please let me know well in advance, at least a few days, if not a week in advance, so I can prepare for that. Okay. Otherwise, I will go digging into some more marketing campaigns for next week. How about that? Oh, you guys are very welcome. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Miho. I appreciate your feedback and your kind words. By the way, guys, keep in mind, remember to look at the email that Beverly gives you tomorrow with tonight's recording, and also go out to the community site, add your profile out there, and more importantly, you know, I want to know what you want to discuss, so let me know that also. If you decide you do want to take one of the other programs, just let Beverly or I know, and you automatically get it for half price. Okay, guys, I hope you have an awesome week here, and I appreciate you. God bless you, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.